They had this crazy idea of establishing a nonprofit organization in Arizona that was going to advocate on behalf of children and children who were disadvantaged children and children who were vulnerable. And with the help of Eddie Basha and his wife Nadine, we got the resources together to at least begin with a $50,000 grant from the Steele Foundation. Most data told us that Arizona consistently was, if not on the bottom, then near the bottom of indicators of child well-being. We had too many kids who had no health care, affordable child care. It didn't exist. There was little understanding of how kids got into foster care, why kids were staying in foster care so long. We had one of the highest rates of child poverty in those days. We were advocating for pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. We talked about health. It was called Healthy Families and a program called Health Start. And so we went in with that package called Success by 6. Throughout the legislative session, we talked about it. We went to the media. We had editorial meetings. We went all over the state. We got public dollars to go to the Department of Education to fund preschool in both schools and in private nonprofit daycare centers. And that was a big deal. And it was Governor Napolitano who put together a task force, and regulations were written essentially saying that kids cannot be bouncing around foster care year after year after year. There had to be an end. And so Governor Napolitano, with the help of all of the advocates, worked hard to move that agenda. But where are we going to get the money? We don't have the resources. And that was when I met with the person who was then the head of the Annie E. Casey Foundation and talked to him about our need to have people on staff who could help us understand where the money was coming from and where the money was going, taxes and revenue. And that was when I hired Dana Naymark, who was the first person to head that piece of Children's Action Alliance.
2 years after I became CEO was when Janet Napolitano resigned as governor to become Homeland Security Secretary. And Jan Brewer became governor, so our political atmosphere changed abruptly. But also the nation and Arizona were plunging into the Great Recession. And Arizona was experiencing the most enormous budget deficit we had ever experienced in our history. And literally every program and service that meant anything for children and families was on the chopping block. And so everything we had fought for in our 20-year history up until then was at stake. And a lot was lost. But fortunately, we had the smartest staff ever, the team of funders, of board members, of community leaders, of partners and coalitions. I'm proudest of 3 things when I think back that stand out to me. One is our multi-year, multifaceted, knockdown, drag-out fight to bring back kids' care. It was a great victory to get it back, and it was a victory that meant so much because healthcare coverage is the foundation for children, for their learning, for their social development, for everything else they can do and want to do in their lives. So that was huge. And at the same time, we were also fighting a multifaceted fight to protect the Affordable Care Act, which also was healthcare coverage for tens of thousands of children in Arizona. And Arizona and Senator McCain became pivotal to that protection, which went on multiple years and multiple fights. Second thing is our collective efforts to really be a voice and put out a call to action. And that is not just one simple message. So we created groups for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren and how they could develop their own advocacy agenda and be advocates at the legislature and create legislative change with their own staff and their own lobbying agenda. We created groups for young adults who had experienced foster care. We created a leadership academy for people in the community who wanted to be advocates in their own workplace, in their faith congregations, in their community groups. We created candidate debates, different ways for Arizonans in all types of communities to be able to get involved and become their own advocates.
And then the pandemic happened. We just didn't understand fully what we were facing in terms of the pandemic. Parents were very challenged by not having childcare arrangements, by not having their children go to school. So that was why we were so focused on really making sure that we were a voice, both with the governor's office, at the legislature, with wherever the table we needed to be at, to try to shape the response and to remind people, who are essential workers? What are the needs of families? What are the needs of foster children? What are the needs of young people who've just left foster care? And try to really hold that for folks who are deciding and shaping Arizona's response to the pandemic. I look back and I just think we were all just the precariousness, the unknown, the fear, and the loss. We had to connect and meet and figure out, what does advocacy look like when the Capitol is closed? What does advocacy look like when leaders of state agencies are in a completely, unknown and navigating? What does our advocacy agenda look like? So we really pivoted it to shaping the response and making sure that folks weren't left out of it. It was just making sure the staff was okay, because it was COVID and it was the summer of George Floyd. And we had already started doing a lot of equity work, really taking a look, cleaning up our own shop, thinking about what does equity mean and holding an equity lens as an organization. We set forth an aspirational vision, which is that we are co-creating with Arizona families what the policy agenda should look like. And that takes a long time to get there. But if that's a core value of who we are, and that's all equity really is, right? Is working in partnership with community versus doing something to a community. If we hold that and just continue towards that aspiration, it's gonna look differently. It's gonna change over the years. It really starts by centering the families that we seek to improve conditions for.
I went to work for Children's Action Alliance to help launch and lead the Arizona Center for Economic Progress. I went there because I saw in the Arizona Center something that had a great need in Arizona. There was a need for an entity that could really connect the dots between the budget and tax decisions that were being made at the state capitol and how that impacts our ability to invest in the priorities that so many Arizonans care about, things like public education and healthcare. It was a real honor to have the opportunity to launch the Arizona Center, and I think it plays such an important role in Arizona's future in being able to advocate for those types of issues going forward. In addition to launching the Arizona Center, I think the lawsuit that we brought a couple of years ago to challenge the way the legislature was enacting the budget each year. And what they were doing is they were putting all of these other issues into the state budget that were not related. And so we were one of the parties that helped to lead a lawsuit against that improper budget process. And we were successful. That was one of the most impactful things that could happen at the legislature in the future is that decision, because it really will change the way the legislature does business. One of the shifts I've seen is a more of a recognition at the state capitol of the importance of investing in children and families. We still have a long way to go, because often trying to get the legislature to do things is still a big challenge. But I think more and more you're seeing legislators working across the aisle to make investments in critical areas, things like the expansion of kids care this last year, things like putting more money in for kinship providers, because I think they recognize the importance of investments like that in strengthening our economy in the future.
I'm very proud of the footprint that Children's Action Alliance has in the community, and I think when you work here, you don't always realize how deep that footprint is. I mean, I don't just mean in the policy advances we've made, because some of them are huge, and we may never know the full impact of some of the wins we've had over the years. Children's Action Alliance has been a training ground for people who want to learn about advocacy and specifically advocating for children and families. And it's a joke a little bit inside that, everybody's worked at Children's Action Alliance, or they've partnered with us, or they've interned with us, or they've had a fellowship here. We have lawmakers who come to us and ask us for help and information and guidance because they know that we are an independent and reliable source of information that they can use when they're pulling together bills they want to run or just looking for information on a particular subject that they want to learn more about.
What we've managed to do at CAA is we created roots. The roots are there, and we're now blooming, growing the tree. And I think that I would hope in the future that CAA would continue to be as smart, have staff as smart, have boards as committed as you have now, and that the policymakers realize that opening the doors of opportunity for all of Arizona's children, all of them, and that's their job. The question should be, is this good for children and families? You know, we used to have the saying, who's for kids and who's just kidding? Everyone's for kids. Who isn't for kids? And then show me.